Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watch in the WWE Network. Today is going to be all about WrestleMania 10, as seen in the network. I saw it only a couple of weeks ago. Now we're getting into the territory of the pay-per-views that I've watched just recently, not, kind of recalling back to when I watched 1 through 8 back in the fall, so these are a little bit more recent. But we are getting more into the WrestleManias that mean more, have less matches, more meaningful matches. So the reviews are going to be a little more in-depth going forward. Starting with this show, I thought it was a good show on the whole. Kicking off the show, that was Owen Hart versus Bret Hart in one of the best WrestleMania matches, easily up to this point. From 1 to 10, I know there's been a lot of good matches between Hogan and Savage, Hogan and Warrior, Warrior and Savage, my 3 favorite matches up to this point in WrestleMania history. But this WrestleMania match, I wouldn't call it underrated because a lot of people recognize it as being great, but not only was the feud so well built with the tension being teased between Hart and Owen after they tag team for a while, but, everything going into this match, everything that went into this WrestleMania, this story with Bret Hart, not only winning the Royal Rumble, but also having this feud at the same time with Owen. And I've had some people say, why did he pull double duty on the show? Why didn't he just compete in the title match instead of Owen in this match in the opener? I'm not exactly sure why they had him pull double duty. Maybe it was kind of a case of, like we saw at WrestleMania 30 this past year, almost 20 years after this, that they were short on star power. They needed people to work twice, like we saw with Daniel Bryan. Bret Hart was the Daniel Bryan on this show to an extent. But still, though, it made for an amazing opener, a lot of great storytelling, a lot of great in-ring action in this match between Bret and Owen. Absolutely a match you should go out of your way to see. If anything else, watch the first 30 minutes of WrestleMania 10 for this matchup. I thought it was fantastic in every sense of the word, so definitely go out of your way to see this matchup. But Owen Hart pulling out the victory, leaving Bret Hart at a disadvantage going into his championship match later on in the night against Yokozuna for the WWE title. So that was a very, very good match and easily one of the best openers in WrestleMania history, if not the best opener in WrestleMania history. It's up there. Triple H and Daniel Bryan from this past year's WrestleMania 30, is definitely up there on the list, but this is easily one of the best openers of all time. I thought it was excellent. But up next, a mixed tag team match. Only one of, I think, only the second of many mixed tag team matches in WrestleMania history. I think it was the second one, because I know the first one was Dusty and Sapphire versus Randy and Miss Elizabeth. And I apologize for all the voice in the background that my asshole roommates are making noise next door. If you can hear that on the microphone, if the microphone catches up on that, but it picks up. But still, the second match on this show, mixed tag team match, Bam Bam Bigelow and Luna Vachon versus Doink the Clown and Dink the Clown. Like I said, only the second mixed tag team match in history, the first one being Dusty and Sapphire versus Randy and Elizabeth. Pretty fun matchup. I mean, it was throwaway for the most part, but I mean, they worked a nice mixed tag team match. It was what it was. Got about 6 minutes. Nothing really out of the ordinary, but it was fun for what it was. And I think Luna Vachon is very underrated, and I think she should go down. I know Chyna's obviously up there on the list. Same thing with Alundra Blayze, who was also on this show, and I'll get to her in a second. But Luna Vachon, I thought, was great in her role as a heel, as a manager, as a wrestler as well. I think she deserves a Hall of Fame induction at some point. Very underrated, in my opinion. But a fun mixed tag team match. I saw Bam Bam Bigelow and Luna Vachon pick up the victory. Up next, Randy Savage versus Crush in a Falls Count Anywhere matchup. And a pretty decent matchup. I mean, I was even surprised that Randy Savage was still wrestling at this point in his career. This is 1994. After quote-unquote retiring in his match against Ultimate Warrior 3 years prior, he was back in action on this show with Crush. It just made me think of all the missed opportunities with Randy Savage in the latter half of his career, in his final few years as a wrestler. In that, on his DVD, which I watched just recently, and I'm hopefully going to do a review for it for my website, Next Era Wrestling, at some point in time. I think he pitched at one point in time to work with the up-and-coming Shawn Michaels, and Vince shot it down. The match, I think the match actually did happen at one point, but not in like a full-on feud that Randy Savage had pitched, and he wanted to culminate in a two-year blow-off with Shawn Michaels going over and kind of making him into a star. And obviously, Shawn Michaels went on to become one of the greatest, if not the greatest sports entertainer in history anyway, one of the greatest professional wrestlers alive. But still, though, I mean, that feud would have been great, and I think that matchup could have happened on this show had Vince not nixed the idea. But this wasn't a bad matchup. I thought it was fun for what it was. They kind of made the most of the Falls Count Anywhere stipulation. Randy Savage went over, so a good matchup. I just wish they could have done more with Randy Savage in the final few years of his career. And I know they were in the midst of a youth movement with Diesel and Shawn and Bret Hart and even Yokozuna to an extent. But they definitely could have used Randy Savage to a better use in his final few years with the company. He was the last real legend at this point in time in the WWE in 1994. Hogan had left. I think Piper was not gone yet. He didn't go to WCW for a few more years. I think he was on the show too. He was the special guest referee actually in the main event. But, he was the last real veteran left, and as Warrior was kind of in and out, Hogan was not on the show, Warrior wasn't on the show. I think Warrior was already gone by this point. He wouldn't come back for another few more years. But still, though, back to what I was saying before. Good match between Savage and Crush. Up next for the Women's Championship, Alundra Blayze versus Lelani Kai. I apologize if I mispronounced that, but it was decent for what it was. It was your basic women's matchup for the most part. I mean, I thought it was very well wrestled. I think Alundra Blayze, aka Medusa from WCW, is very underrated, and she too deserves a WWE Hall of Fame induction at some point. Kind of revolutionized women's wrestling back when she was given the title, and she ran with the ball back in the early 1990s before bringing it back to prominence during her time. But still, the match only got like 3 or 4 minutes, so it really wasn't anything out of the ordinary. It was really no different than the matches you see today from the Divas. I mean, this was a lot better because it featured 2 great in-ring athletes, and they were allowed to do their thing for the time they were in there for. But still, it's not like it got 5 to 10 minutes. It only got about 3.5 minutes, barely. But still, I thought it was good for what it was, and nice to get the women on the show in some meaningful manner to an extent. Up next for the WWF Tag Team titles, Men on a Mission, Mabel and Mo defeating the Quebecers by countout, so they didn't win the championships. But the match was okay for what it was. I don't really remember much about the matchup. I know it was just kind of decent. And I talked about my early WrestleMania reviews, how the tag team matches kind of stole the show. Not so the case on this show. I mean, by this point in WrestleMania history, the main events really started to steal the show, with Hogan not being in every main event every year. But it wasn't terrible by any means, but the only thing that I can remember while watching this matchup, the only thing I remember thinking while watching this match was that Men in a Mission was like the exact replica of New Day, and it's probably the other way around, of course, but they were like, it was like the New Day in 1994, like 20 years prior. In 1994 was the New Day with Men on a Mission. It's not like they were a terrible gimmick. I know Mabel, aka Big Daddy V, Viscera would have a very decorated run in the WWE, but it was a very limited gimmick, and it really wasn't going to go anywhere. It was kind of par for the course for all these stupid gimmicks that Vince had in his WWE 94, 95, those kind of mid-90s era. But fine for what it was, count-out victory, kind of kept the titles on the Quebecers, yet at the same time giving the win to Men on a Mission. Up next, the first of 2 WWE Championship matches in WrestleMania. I think the only WrestleMania with 2 WWE title matches. Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't remember another WrestleMania where the title was defended twice. But because in the 1994 Royal Rumble, both Lex Luger and Bret Hart were deemed the victors, they were both given championship matches on this show. Now, from what I understand, the whole thing with Lex Luger was that he was originally scheduled to win that title at SummerSlam the year prior, in 1993, the whole kind of slamming him on the boat, which I forget the name of, I'm sorry, but it was on 4th of July, I do remember that. A huge moment, he was getting over as this huge babyface, and they did not have him win the championship ultimately at SummerSlam. He won the match via countout, but still though, I mean, I guess they wanted to wait on him winning the championship, and they wanted to see until WrestleMania to see who was more popular between Bret and Luger. So they both had him win the Rumble, and whoever was going to be more popular by WrestleMania, they would give the championship to. And that of course, ended up going to Bret Hart. So they probably should have just put the championship on Luger when they had the chance in the summer, because Yokozuna would have a pretty lengthy reign as champion for about, I think, 280 days or something like that. I know he's up there. Yeah, I think he's tied with Cena and JBL, or somewhere around there, but nevertheless, match was okay for what it was. Luger was not terrible. He was okay, and he was really over, like I said, as a babyface. But as an in-ring athlete, he left a lot to be desired, and I still think at some point he deserves a Hall of Fame induction. And like I said, he's not one of the all-time greats, but he definitely made an impact for the time that he was in WWE, in the time that he contended for the championship, including on this show, with Mr. Perfect as the special guest referee, and this would kind of trigger a feud between Luger and Perfect. I think they would turn Perfect heel at some point. So this was the return of Mr. Perfect to the company, and he kind of served his role well, and he was really entertaining to watch. But the match wasn't, it was okay. It was decent between Yokozuna and Luger. And like I said, Luger was not the greatest in-ring athlete, and of course Yokozuna wasn't either. And he can get a good match out of you can get a good match out of him if he has the right opponent. And Luger just wasn't that guy. Like I said, not a terrible matchup, but they just kind of barely made it through. Up next, quick squash here, only 30-second squash with Earthquake just kind of decimating Adam Bomb, so that was over quickly. Up next, of course, one of the greatest matches in WrestleMania history, Ramon versus Shawn Michaels in the first ever ladder match in WWE history, officially anyway, on the record books, between Ramon and Michaels, like I said, for the Intercontinental Championship. A fantastic matchup. I know you hear all these stories about how great these matches are, but you really need to see it for yourself in order to realize how great it is. I did watch their SummerSlam match from WrestleMania, or from SummerSlam 95, I think it was. Not this same year. I think it was the following year. I watched that back in like 08 or something. I was blown away then, and I was blown away now when watching this matchup. I thought it was fantastic. Diesel didn't interfere too much, who was the bodyguard of Shawn Michaels at that time, but you of course could see they had big plans for him as a single star down the line, as this big guy, as Vince loves in all of his wrestlers. But still, though, a great match between Ramon and Michaels. One of the greatest ladder matches that I've ever seen, definitely kicking off the ladder match era in WWE on a very high note, no pun intended. But Ramon would emerge victorious as the new Intercontinental Champion. And not only was the match great, too, this kind of goes back to Hart versus Hart, brother versus brother, Owen versus Bret from earlier on in the evening. Not only was the match great, but I'm a sucker for a great story, and I thought this matchup told an awesome story with Shawn Michaels being stripped of the title, but he thought he never lost that championship, so there were two belts, and Ramon had won the championship in the interim, leading to this culmination of the quote-unquote champion versus champion matchup at WrestleMania. So I thought the story was great, the match was great, and of course, like I said before, they would go on to have a rematch in the ladder match environment, in the ladder match stipulation, about a year and a half later at SummerSlam. So awesome stuff all around. We get to the main event, Bret Hart contending for the gold against Yokozuna, who was still champion at this point in time, with Roddy Piper making his return as well as the special guest referee. I thought this match was better than their WrestleMania 9 match. Not a great match, but they told a better story. The drama was there, that Bret Hart could possibly walk away with the belt after going through Owen Hart earlier in the evening. Both of these guys pulled double duty. But obviously, I think Bret's matchup was a little bit more vigorous in that he wrestled a better match earlier on in the evening, and he had more time to rest, of course, from a storyline standpoint, but Yokozuna didn't have to do much in his matchup with Luger earlier on in the show. Both guys were kind of even in that respect, but Bret Hart was the underdog here, going up against the guy that he lost the championship to 1 year prior. So again, nice long-term booking, and I know that wasn't the plan from the start. They wanted Bret Hart to drop the champion, or have Hogan drop the championship to Bret Hart, but he didn't want to do that, so they gave the belt back to Yokozuna. And Bret Hart's kind of year-long journey to win back that championship culminated on this show when he won back the belt from Yokozuna. And I thought it was awesome. The moment was great. The matchup wasn't really anything too special. I thought it was better, like I said, than the WrestleMania 9 encounter, but it was still like a decent match at best. But still, then the moment with him winning back that championship from Yokozuna was great, kind of wrapping up that story that they were initially telling 1 year prior at WrestleMania 9. So the match was great way to go off the show with Bret Hart and everyone, the entire roster coming in and kind of lifting him up in the air as the new WWE champion. So I thought that made for an amazing moment. But on the whole, though, I thought this was a really good WrestleMania, definitely better than some of the other lackluster ones, and everyone, to each their own. Some people do like the earlier WrestleManias. Not all of those were bad. I mean, just some of them had a lot of meaningless matches, and at this point, WrestleMania 10, we get into the era where all the matches in the card start to mean something, or at least start to mean a little of something, and aren't completely random, and aren't all 2 or 3 minutes. At least most of the matches on the show had a story behind them, and therefore making them a little bit more entertaining, a little bit more enjoyable to watch. But I thought this was a really good WrestleMania. Absolutely go out of your way to see, if only for the opener between Owen and Bret. The ladder match between Ramon and Michaels for the Intercontinental Championship. Spectacular stuff. And the main event wasn't great, but the moment of Bret Hart winning that championship back was well worth it, though. So good stuff there. And the rest of the undercard was pretty solid as well, with kind of rounding it out with the other WWE title match, the Women's Championship being defended, the WWE Tag Team titles being defended, as well as the Mixed Tag Team match, the Falls Count Anywhere, and everything else in the show. So I thought this was a really good WrestleMania, easily one of the better ones that I've watched since I started this whole WrestleMania review. So go back and watch it on the network before WrestleMania 31 comes their way in a little over a month. But this is going up on Saturday, so on Sunday I'll be talking about WrestleMania 11 from my backyard of Hartford, Connecticut. We go from one of the better WrestleManias to one of the worst WrestleManias, and I'll talk about why in that review. So stay tuned till tomorrow for my review of WrestleMania 11. In the meantime and in between time, though, you can find me on Twitter at WrestleRant. Make sure to check me out on Facebook at Graham Jason Matthews. Visit nextEraWrestling.weebly.com. And I've got this question before in hashtag AskGSM. What are the reviews of the WCW pay-per-views, of the ECW pay-per-views? I'm not going to do them here on WrestleRant here on the channel because obviously right now I'm kind of a little bit occupied with the WrestleMania reviews. But in between watching WrestleMania, actually just yesterday as of this filming, I watched WCW Starrcade 1983, the first ever WCW event. It wasn't even a pay-per-view. It was like a closed-circuit show. So I watched that on the network. My review should be up by the time you watch this on either Friday or Saturday. I'm going to try to watch the ECW and WCW pay-per-views in chronological order, and the reviews are going to be in written form on my website, nextEraWrestling.weebly.com, if you want to check those out. So make sure to, the link's down below, too, if you can't remember that, or if it's too long, and I know it is. I know it's kind of a bothersome. But still, the link's down below. Same thing with the Facebook, the Twitter. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and share. All support is greatly appreciated. Thanks again for listening, folks, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow with my review of WrestleMania 11.